Is Rise of the Ronin Ghost of Tsushima's little brother? Also, is it accessible? We're going to be talking about that on this preview episode of Gaming Insight. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome into Gaming Insight, the podcast where I normally talk about the biggest news of the week, but today is a very special episode. This is our Rise of the Ronin preview. I'm going to be talking about the accessibility, but I also have a guest with me to talk about the game overall. I've got another Steve. We've got Steve Vigvari on here. Well, how's it going, Steve?
I'm doing really good, Steve. Just a couple of Steves talking Rise of the Ronin. What else could you want? How else could you want to spend your day?
I know. It's like two Steves talking about Japanese games. I don't know.
Right? Yeah, two generic white guys. I mean, we got glasses, we got the beard. We might as well. We're just a palette swap of each other.
Pretty much. It's kind of like we were on another podcast and we basically have to have nicknames for each other. Like I'm basically just Saylor and you're Stevie Monday. How did that Monday nickname start, by the way?
Okay, so I can throw you into the deep end of this whole thing. So actually what happened was I was sent out to Vancouver to go to EA to go preview last year's NHL. And what happened was my editor or my partner over at Console Creatures, he was emailing with them, and what happened was he emailed back and said, I'm going to loop Steve in on Monday. That's what he meant to type, but he typed, I'm going to loop in Steve Monday. And EA just kind of ran with it. Luckily, I know one of the PR people there pretty well and everything, so I arrived at their campus, walked in, and he comes up to me, he's like, do you go by a name, an online name? And I was like, no, I'm pretty well secured as Steve Vigvari. That's who, I'm as that as an author and everything and all that. And he was like, okay, hold on. And then he comes back, he's like, so there might be a little situation here. I was like, oh, I love that. I love getting into situations before even going into the security of a campus like this. And yeah, lo and behold, they had me down on every single thing as Steve Monday. The security badge, the paperwork that they had me fill out and everything, it was all just Steve Monday. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to embrace this. It feels really good. It sounds like a noir detective name. So yeah, I'm about it. I'm Steve Monday when I need to be.
Okay. All right. Well, Steve Monday, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you are on the internet? You mentioned Console Creatures, but tell us a little bit about where we can be able to find you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm primarily a freelance writer or podcast host. I mean, you mentioned it yourself. We join each other and a bunch of other panelists on a gaming podcast. I'm also, my bylines can be found on iPhone in Canada, Mobile Syrup, Console Creatures. We also run the Creature Cast podcast. And then I'm just kicking around the internet. You can find me. I make it easy. You can find me everywhere at just S Vigvari.
Perfect. And you can be able to follow him in the description down below. I'll have links to follow him on all the stuff that he does. Okay, so let's talk Rise of the Ronin. I sort of teased a little bit at the beginning that it is this Ghost of Tsushima's little brother, and we can only talk about. So I have to preface this: we can only talk about up to a certain point within the game. Mm-hmm. We're not allowed to share any footage whatsoever until the review embargo lifts. So there's not going to be any video or if you're looking for accessibility menu information, I can't give that out other than just kind of my own personal take on it. But I want to get your thoughts, Steve. What did you think of Rise of the Ronin? And do you think that maybe is the Ghost of Tsushima descriptor pretty apt, or do you have a different descriptor for it?
I think on first blush, absolutely. I don't think Sony did themselves really any favors by releasing this in March and then couple that with the announcement of the PC port for Ghost of Tsushima. Is everyone's just got this feudal Japan hive mind on their brain right now. Also, Disney Plus has the Shogun series, which is excellent right now. It's just we're in a really good time for this genre of storytelling, and I'm about it. But at first blush, I can definitely see the comparisons there. Just even before even playing the game, I was like, okay, this feels like something akin to Ghost of Tsushima. But now that I've gotten my hands on it, starting to talk about those first couple hours that we're allowed to kind of preview in detail, I do think that there are similarities there. And
Mhm.
but I do think at the end of the day, this is a Team Ninja game. I don't think that this is parroting or taking too much inspiration from Ghost of Tsushima. I think that at the end of the day, if you're familiar with Team Ninja's contemporary games, as in Neo or Wolong Fallen Dynasty, which came out last year, this game feels like the successor to this. It feels like, hey, we're taking a lot of what those games kind of introduced and we're just putting our own spin on it, but grounding it in this blanket of history.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It starts off definitely in that kind of Ghost of Tsushima vibe,
Right.
with and there's definitely some noticeable differences, at least because you can have like you are basically one half of of Blade Twin, basically kind of like a secondary character that is basically has a similar sort of fighting style as you. I won't get into the story to spoil it, but then it kind of does. Kind of branch off a little bit, and you start to kind of see a little bit more of what the world is like, and then also a little bit more of the different types of mechanics that are in there. There's definitely a lot more to do, or a lot more in this than Ghost is, but I do find that actually mechanics wise, there are similarities. Like you can choose your like martial style at any given time. You can you can sort of like that's where your stances are in Ghost of Tsushima, but in this one, it's sort of like your different martial style. You do have like you can be able to block and parry, but you can also dodge at enemies. But I do find that with this one, there is a little bit more involved with some of the combat. But then there's also just other different mechanics in the game and different, like you have obviously different companions that you can be able to bring on with you, and as allies, you can basically there's a whole bunch of different tasks and activities you can be able to do, and obviously you have your own character instead of just playing as a one character like Jin. You basically get to create your own, but you also get to create your twin as well. So I don't know about you. I don't know. What did you think of building your character? Like, because I actually built mine to be sort of actually an actual set of twins, with like different, like same facial structure and everything, but like different hair and like kind of this, like change them up a little bit. But they still, like, if you look at them like side by side, like they look like that they're actual twins. Did you do that too, or did you kind of create like your own sort of like different for each of them?
So coming into it, I didn't know how involved the character creation was going to be, because I love Team Ninja games, but at the end of the day, it is very much you're playing at this character, go out and experience this kind of story and adventure with them.
Yeah.
Here, and when they introduced the character creation, I was like, okay, cool. They present, the two Blade twins. I was like, okay, I'm going to create one of them, I guess, and then the other one's just going to be, the computer or whatever. So yeah, I went with the first one. I made this like super like badass samurai, like scars and everything. Like it's a very in-depth character creator.
Sure.
And I had a lot of fun with it. And then I was like, cool, we're good. Let's start the game. And it's like, no, now do the other one. I was like, oh, hold up. Wait. And you have the option, the male and the female. And as I started going through the female, one of the default ones looked very much like Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, and I was like, hold up, can I cook with this? Can I cook with this? And I started going through, and I cannot wait to actually show this off, because I was like, I'm impressed with myself. I don't really care about a lot of character creators, but this one I was like, this one I'm proud of. And then you get to the very end and it's like, oh, now you have your character creator code that you can share online. And in the game, that there's an actual leaderboard similar to almost like Forza, where you have your car customization. The more times that people download or use your character code, the higher your rank is on the leaderboard. And I was like, oh, I cannot wait for this, because I'm proud of it. I don't know if a lot of people will like it or not, but it's something that I'm going to put out there when I'm able to, because I was like, oh, this is really cool. That's the character I went with.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I should have gone back and made the Joker, but say la vie.
You know what? Hey, it's fine. You can change your appearance, which is actually something you can do. Like that is like in what we can talk about in the preview. So you can go in and change yourself, but that's actually pretty cool. I didn't even think about doing that, because I saw that. I was like, oh, that kind of looks like Margot Robbie a little bit. But I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll just sort of like see what other options they had, and then I completely forgot about it. But I definitely gonna have to see your Harley Quinn after
because
that.
I started going in. And I was like, can I get the base color of like her blonde hair? Can I do like the blue and red streaks and everything? Can I finagle the face tattoos enough to make it look like Harley Quinn? I was like, oh, I'm I'm pretty happy with this.
Nice. Okay, I'm gonna have to see it for sure. So I will say, like from the get go, at least from an accessibility standpoint, I did notice that there actually is an accessibility menu. They call it user accessibility, which was something new that I hadn't even thought of before. But they do have some things like you can be able to remap controls. There are some auto assist and there are some subtitle options, and there are some actual, like, you can be able to set from certain button presses from holds to toggles. Like you can be able to set like your aim from a hold to a toggle, or you know, hitting like when you're having to switch between the different characters or your different like sub weapons. You can basically just hit L, like just L or L1 or R1 at like, and just toggle it instead of holding it to be able to then using the D-pad to select which one. So there is that for mobile accessibility, and there actually is also full captions as well for those who are deaf and hard of hearing, which is nice. But one of the things I found a little bit tricky, and I want to know what your thoughts are in regards to the combat, because I'm still trying to figure out the combat, because there are these things. So they give you the ability, the basic ability to be able to block attacks. And you can basically you can set that to a hold or even set that to a toggle. And you're constantly blocking any attacks that are coming at you. And you can also, you know, dodge as well. But then they have this mechanic called counter spark, where if you are able to like basically do a perfect parry, you're able to stagger enemies, and or at least, you know, they say kind of like you can frighten them, essentially, kind of like throw them off guard, and then you can be able to do a pretty devastating attack. But if you do, like, you have to kind of line it up perfectly, and sometimes they do have some pretty like, you have to figure out the different combos. I do find that the timing of it is a little too fast for me, even with the different accessibility there. And I want to know your thoughts, Steve. What did you think of the combat with those mechanics in there?
So I do agree. There's a lot of combat mechanics. They throw a lot at you in those first couple hours. It's always like splash screen after splash screen of here's something else we're going to introduce. In terms of the counter spark, I'm coming at it with a little more experience, only because I played Sekiro, which was like the embryonic state of that whole, if you do a perfect parry, you're going to chip away at, in this case, the key, which then once that bar is filled up, you can stagger the enemy, deliver like a critical strike, just like you explained. Then Team Ninja kind of took that inspiration, kind of interwove it into Wolong, which was the first time that I kind of adopted this. And I was like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to get it with the flair that Team Ninja comes into these kinds of games with. So coming into Rise of the Ronin now, I feel that there's a certain level of expertise I have under my belt. That being said, though, I do agree that there are so many different enemy types and variants of different enemies. Even though we're existing in this grounded state of storytelling, there are so many different variations of enemies that their timing is widely different. The timing of them, like revving up like a charge attack or something. I'm still after hours, I'm still trying to figure out what
that
the
animation
is exactly. Like, not even the animation, because sometimes they'll pull back and then delay it, and it's like throwing you off. So I'll tap the button and I'm like, oh, I'm mid swing in an animation, and then they'll hit me. And I do feel like some of the visuals there get in the way of that perfect timing. But that being said, when you hit it, when you get that, and then like the red ball like explodes on the character, and you're like, I'm going in for that that deadly critical attack, it feels so darn satisfying. And I think that's the trade-off.
Yeah, I agree, because like when you are able to land it and then you see that button prompt, you can be able to hit triangle, and it does like this sort of cinematic kind of critical strike effect. It just looks so badass. And sometimes I will say that kind of trips me up, because you think it's like, oh, good, I've actually taken care, like I've killed that enemy, but they're like, no, you're still ain't done yet. You still got, like, they've got some pretty beefy health bars. And so that's what I had to kind of like, oh yeah, shoot, I gotta figure that out too.
I got tripped up a little bit, because you do that, you'll like stab them into the ground if you're using like a spear or pole armor and everything. They're laying there, and I'll turn my attention to another enemy. I'm like, come on, let's fight and everything. And then I'll just get swiped from the back. I'm like, oh, this guy, I thought I finished you off and everything. It's like, okay, so there is a bit of like, you gotta have your attention open the entire time. You never let your guard down.
Yeah, and that's a thing too, is that because there is a ability for accessibility, you can be able to like using R3, you can be able to lock on to an enemy, and you can sort of using the right thumbstick, you can be able to go through each of the enemies too, which is nice. Like it definitely helps. But when you're in a group, sort of like there's like 3 or 4 enemies attacking you, and they're kind of like being from behind, you then have to turn your character in order to be able to like switch between them. So it's not like the camera just all of a sudden like switches to a person behind you and then you automatically turn, which can be troublesome, especially if like, because you can only focus in on one enemy at a time. And there's another one that's about to hit you. You then have to switch over to that enemy, so then you can be able to attack or be able to block whatever attack they're coming from. So you're having to constantly sort of switch between the two. But then also as well, it's like you can be able to hit like L1 or R1, and then using your D-pad to basically, or your face buttons to do special attacks, or switch between the different martial styles, or then even switching to your ally companion character. And that's another thing you have to keep track of, because if your enemy, like if your companion character goes down, you then have to go over to them and then revive them, and then they get like half health back. But then it's like but also if you do die as your character, then it will automatically switch you to that companion character. But it's a lot that's happening. And I'm still like I am dying into like easy missions. There was one mission where basically you go up against a big, huge boss. And I've done that like maybe 10, 15 times. And I'm on the easiest difficulty.
Okay, yeah. No, there's definitely a learning curve to the game. Again, I'm coming at it from someone who's had previous experience with these kinds of games, especially from Team Ninja. So even I'm finding it very the onboarding experience is a little tough, only because there's so many different mechanics. I mean, there's not only that, but then there's the blade flash, which after you use your weapon enough times that it gets covered in blood, you can do like this little like flick, and then it makes your I don't even, to be honest, I don't even know really what it does in terms of like perks, because they throw so much at you. But I think, to the game's credit, you don't have to use every single system, every mechanic the game throws at you. You can just kind of find what works for you and gets through it, at least in the early stages. I don't know if that curve like progresses in the later stages of the game, but as far as like the early hours of the game, I'm having a okay time taking what I've played with, like, Wolong, or, even other similar Souls games, and kind of just adopting it here and being like, okay, this is fine. The other thing, and you said it yourself, the difficulty modes, I think that's a huge improvement over other Team Ninja games, which Team Ninja, as far as going back to the original Ninja Gaiden on the original Xbox, they are very difficult games. Neo, Wolong, they don't have difficulty modes for you. Here you have 3, and I think that gives you a lot of agency to be able to tailor the experience for yourself. You talked about button remapping too, so there are ways to kind of dip your toe in and make it a more approachable experience if you are kind of someone who's like, oh, I don't really know if I've ever played one of these games before, but I like the style of this. I want to get in. So okay, so then bump it down to the easy difficulty if that means that you can actually get in and start playing.
That's actually good to know, because I myself have not been able to play those games, because especially with Wolong, like I've heard it was like extremely difficult to sort of pick up and play, especially that first boss. Essentially, I keep hearing about that so much. So I'm like, I ain't gonna touch it. But it's good that you mentioned that it wasn't in there, and then that now there actually is difficulty, because I do think for those who are watching this for the accessibility aspect of it, I think. It's good to know that basically they are trying to be able to add in accessibility, because this is my first, obviously I think probably my first Team Ninja game ever, and so I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised to see what accessibility was there. It's not going to be fully accessible to a lot, but there is definitely enough there that you can see, okay, there's I think that with either a further improvement, either if there's post-launch updates, or potentially like a future Team Ninja game, like they are trying. They are basically trying to cover a lot of different areas of accessibility. It may take a little bit of a learning curve with this one to make sure that you can sort of find a style that works for you. Because as you said, there are different sort of combat mechanics you can just ignore, and you can just sort of like upgrade your skills and stuff like that, and your different sort of combat styles, and you can find one that suits you. There is sort of one particular like combat style I think you kind of have to sort of adopt, and that's when there are certain bosses or enemies that your companions are a little bit more adept at. They do have a little icon that pops up that sort of says like, okay, this character is much better at fighting this enemy than you can switch between back and forth if you wanted to. So you do have to keep an eye on that. But for the most part, as you're right, like you can literally just hack and slash if you want, and just spam the dodge button if you need to, or have the block button basically up all the time. So you don't have to sort of like I should say. There are some times where the only way to be able to attack an enemy is using counter spark, so you kind of have to get better at that.
That is true.
I've only encountered that maybe like twice. I don't know if it kind of pops up a little bit later on in sort of more difficult sort of boss battles or whichever. But for so far, it doesn't seem to be a blocker on my end.
Yeah, I do think, just based off previous knowledge, that I think the counter spark will be an integral part throughout the entire game. That is something that I think the game will encourage you to at least master. I'm sure at some point you'll be able to kind of just brute force your way through it if you really needed to, by either scaling the difficulty or leveling up certain weapons or stuff like that. But I do think, just based on how integral it was in Wolong and seeing it now implemented again here, it is one of those things that you might just want to get used to the timing of just being able to do that perfect parry, because above all else, I mean, you do get really sick animations out of it. So
True.
I mean, it's worth the investment, in my opinion.
I think so too, and I think like the good thing is that at least with the early aspect of the preview that we're talking about, again, I personally have only played up into the preview embargo. Steve has played a little bit longer, so it won't be able to talk a little bit if it does get worse or over time. But I did know that at least the one enemy where I did have to use counter spark, they did basically say that you can still attack without it. It's just that you're not going to be doing as much damage as you could with a counter spark. So you will have to sort of keep an eye on your health and also making sure that you're not getting attacked as much or getting hit as much, because otherwise they have some pretty devastating attacks. I will say that.
Yeah, and similarly, they can do a counter spark measure as well. Like you have your own stamina bar and keys, so that if those are depleted, they can then execute their own kind of power attack. And I think, I mean, just based on the first couple hours, if they execute like 2 of them, your health bar is gone completely. Yes. And you only have a certain amount of like health items that you can have on you at a time. Mm-hmm. And some get, it's not so demanding as like Bloodborne or Dark Souls, where you only have like the Estus flask and you only have like 3 uses. You can hold up to I don't remember what it is in the early stages.
6 or
it's
7.
Like 5 or 6, right?
Yeah.
So that being said, like you still have to be on your toes a little bit, but it is a little easier to get by and use like health items and stuff like that.
Yeah, you can even like set in the settings before you start, like how many sets you kind of get at the beginning, which is nice. Right. So you can basically get up to like 3 sets right at the very start, which definitely helps because you're going to be needing those health potions essentially quite a bit. But yeah, you're right. Like once you when they start doing the counter spark, that's where I'm also having trouble with the animation, because it's like I can see them winding up, I can see it happening, but what like I always just either or a little too early or a little too late, and it just like, and they can do some very devastating like blows, especially like there's like one huge like big brute kind of guy, and he can like, he also has his animation too, so if he grabs it, he'll pick you up in the air by your head and just slam you down onto the ground, and it is brutal. So this is gonna be very,
I think that's the funniest part, is that as steeped in history and as grounded as this game is, they'll throw a little wrench every once in a while. They'll throw like this big baby man. I'm like, what is happening? He's got like a giant like wooden log as a weapon. I was like, oh my god, no, I was not expecting you, where 15 minutes ago I was going against like a British soldier dressed in like the full
Yes.
garb, and now I'm
Yep.
against like this giant behemoth of a man.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too that I should probably mention is that what's cool about that I actually am liking is also the setting, like with the story, because in obviously, you know, we joke about, you know, Ghost of Tsushima and this kind of like feudal Japan, but kind of era, but this is definitely steeped in like the late 19th century. So basically, think like the wild, like the time of the Wild West in the US, but like in Japan. But some of those influences are now being kind of brought into Japan, and that's kind of part where the story kind of like start, like the overarching world. It's sort of like, you know, like, do you stick with traditional Japanese ideals and sort of way of life, or do you accept the sort of the modernization or the westernization of as the people are coming in from the West? But there are some cool things you can be able to do. Like essentially, you can have like rifles and like handguns, so you can kind of, in a way, because a lot of old like Western films were based off of like old Japanese stories and Japanese films, you can kind of have some of that influence in your Japanese. So basically, you can almost create a cowboy samurai, and I am loving it, especially with like the because I have like a whole Western outfit on now right now. I'm just waiting to be able to get like a trench coat and a cowboy hat, and I'm just like, I'm full blown like cowboy samurai right now, and I'm loving it. So if you like that kind of like era of history, there is a bit of that, and also those rifles can definitely pack up like a pretty big punch as far as like being able to use that as your sub weapon too.
Yep, absolutely. I do. You touched on it, but I do like the customization aspect of like the gear and everything. It is a very like, you're picking up gear constantly and going through the menus, upgrading yourself, and just kind of, you know, do I want to go with, because you can have two primary weapons and then the sub weapon, as you mentioned. So it is nice to be like, okay, well, I'm kind of sick of, you know, the spear and the katana. I'm going to switch it up a little bit now.
Yeah.
So I do like that variation and that kind of just progressive system of just upgrading yourself and just testing new things out. It doesn't, at least in the first couple hours, it doesn't feel like you're locked to a single build or a single kind of character. It does feel like, you know, there's a little agency to play as you kind of want to.
That's actually a good thing to mention, because at the beginning it kind of makes you feel like you have to lock into a specific weapon style or different specific weapons, and then that's it, and you're stuck with that for the rest of the game. But the good thing is that you can change your martial style, you can change your weapons at any given point, and you can upgrade them too as well. And they also give you like special like offensive bonuses and defensive bonuses too, which is great. So that you're not locked into, and it's same with like the difficulty too, is that you're not locked into a specific thing. Actually, one of the things I will mention with the difficulty is that if you are on a little bit of a higher difficulty, whether it's normal or like they have a different thing, it's like dawn, dusk, and
Twilight.
Twilight, yeah. So if you're on just the normal, which is dusk, after you kind of go through a boss battle, or at least a pretty like battle, you're being killed multiple times. There will pop up with things like, hey, do you want to be able to go down to a lower difficulty? You can choose yes or no at any given point, but after a few tries, it kind of gives you that option, so you're not like stuck trying to be able to move forward. So that's a nice touch, and I'm glad that they were able to do that in there. But I will say, this game so far is a pretty tough game at lower levels, and so I'm hoping that with the skills I can be able to upgrade, I can get a little bit better.
Yeah, like I said, Team Ninja's kind of known for this beat and this kind of game. I do think that it is nice to see them progress into something that is a little more approachable for people who just want to play these games, because I love the setting of it. I love the atmosphere of the game. It even opens up, like, it almost has a similar title card to Ghost of Tsushima too.
Yeah.
So it like, they know exactly what they're doing in some respects, but it is there is a difficulty curve. There is an onboarding process, and I'm hoping that enough people can kind of see that through, at least through the first couple hours, and test, okay, is this for me? Is this a game that I'm willing to kind of commit to, play by their rules, and kind of learn as I go? Because I think there's a lot here to really appreciate in those early hours. Just the fact that Team Ninja has approached an open world game on its own is pretty impressive to me, someone who has come from Wolong and seen how they approach, like, Wolong was a very big game in terms of its length, in terms of its content. But every level was like these small little pockets, and essentially after time you would revisit different pockets, and kind of like a lot of them would have you go from like point A to B, and then later down the road would be go from point B to A. Now in Rise of the Ronin, it's a full open map, and
Yeah.
that's something impressive from a studio who's never really approached that before. So based on the first couple hours, it seems like they're trying to, you know, fill it out, like you were saying, like with little things to do, little people, like people to see and interact with. And it's very cool to see how they're approaching something a little more ambitious than what they've done in the past.
Yeah, and that's actually some good context to say too, because I will say that while it won't be fully accessible to most disabled players, you could tell that there definitely is enough there that they are keeping that in accessibility in mind too, and that it's good to know that, you know, based on previous Team Ninja titles, that that seems to be a little bit more accessible than previously before, and so they are improving. So while I can't give sort of and we're not going to be able to give our kind of full on like impressions, like a score or anything like that, there is something there that I think could definitely help most folks, but it may not be in that sort of fully accessible sort of realm for different disabilities as well. So we'll definitely give our full review. I believe that comes next week. So we'll have our full review and sort of thoughts there. But yeah, I mean, that's so far, you know, hey, it's pretty good. I'm liking what we're playing so far. What do you think, Steve?
Agreed. I knew I would have a good time with the game in those opening hours coming into it and everything, but I'm glad now I'm being able to talk to you and other people who are previewing the game as well, who have never touched a Team Ninja game, have been, you know, thrown off by it or just kind of dismissed it only because of its difficulty, coming into this and be like, oh, I'm having a good time with these early parts of it. It feels like something that I'll stick through and everything. I'm like, perfect. This is amazing. This is what gaming should be. It should be iterating on something that you're known for, giving something new, and then inviting and opening the doors to more people. And I think if Team Ninja can see this all the way through and keep people engaged, I think that's a real win for me.
That's perfect, and I think that's probably the perfect way to be able to end this here on. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. And if people want to be able to find you again, where people can be able to find you on the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me to talk about Rise of the Ronin. I mean, this was a pleasure. I always love collaborating with you. Two couple Steves just hanging out, and I'll never say no to that. But yeah, you can all find me across the internet at svigvari.
Perfect. All right, thanks y'all, and I'll see you all next week. There'll be the review for Rise of the Ronin for accessibility. Stay tuned for that. And then there'll also be a brand new episode of Gaming Insight on every Friday, as always. So take care, y'all. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next video.